Where on earth did you learn to use a knife like that?
You don't want to know.
Well, it's jolly good. Now?
Now.
Right, it's time for the sugar. That's what turns the juice into marmalade.
Much?
Oh, a lot.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're taking a look at the Marmalade from the Paddington films and children's literature, for which of course we're going to need a whole bunch of oranges. About 3 pounds of scrubbed oranges for this recipe. Now you can use normal navel oranges, but to make genuine marmalade you need Seville sour oranges. These are only ripe in the dead center of winter and are a bit hard to find, but are the only way that you're going to make the tart, slightly bitter concoction so enjoyed by the Brits, Scots, and Peruvian bears alike. Seville sour oranges are different in a few ways. First off, they are positively chock full of seeds. This is a good thing for making jelly, as seeds contain lots of pectin. Second off, you will find that they are very, very sour. And that's about it. Now we're going to play a game of passing the oranges back and forth across the screen a few times, first slicing them in half and then juicing them into a bowl. By hand, of course, just like Mad Eye Moody does in the film. And we're making sure to reserve the pulp and skins, which we are going to separate using a spoon. Orange pulp and seeds are both good sources of pectin, so you'll see how we put those to good use later on. Take care not to pile your orange peels too high, otherwise you might experience complete structural failure. Then we're going to strain the seeds out of the juice and add them to the orange flesh, and then you have yourself the core components of traditional orange marmalade. There's one more step to be taken with the peels, and that is to slice them into small bite-sized pieces. I personally prefer really chunky marmalade, but you can break them down into as small pieces as you like. Go ahead and set those aside, because up until now this party's been all about the oranges, and it's time to make it a bit of a lemon party. Ideally you want to use the slightly smaller, sweeter Meyer lemon, but all I got here is a regular lemon, which I'm going to de-seed and cut into small chunks. Then we are dumping the orange peels, orange juice, and lemon chunks into a large stock pot. We're also going to add just enough water to cover them all up. In my case, about 6 cups. Now you could just add liquid pectin later on in the marmalade making process, but we're going to extract it naturally from all those orange guts and seeds from earlier. We're going to tie them in 4 layers of cheesecloth, tie it up tight with a bit of butcher's twine, and then squeeze it into the hot tub. Just make sure it's as submerged and saturated as possible, and bring this guy to a rolling simmer. For anywhere from 30 minutes to a full hour, we want the orange peels to show absolutely no resistance when cut in half with a spoon. Now we're taking this guy off the heat and removing our sack of scraps. Set that aside, we're not done with it yet, but first we're going to measure exactly how much marmalade we have. I ended up with about 7 cups. Then we're going to add 3/4 of a cup of sugar for every cup of marmalade. So that comes out to 5 1/4 cups. We're just going to give that a cursory mix to dissolve, and then it's time to contend with our pectin. We're going to give this bag a good hard squeeze, not only to get any residual juices out, but all this thick, almost creamy liquid, which is pure natural pectin. We want at least a tablespoon's worth, but don't squeeze your bag too hard, otherwise... I'm sorry, that is the only sound effect I could make for that. Anyway, we are now bringing this guy to a constant simmer, adding an optional pinch of cinnamon, and doggedly pursuing a temperature of 220 degrees Fahrenheit. It's going to come up to 212 very, very quickly, but it's going to stall around 216 for like half an hour, while water continues to evaporate so it can reach its target temperature. Then to test to see if the jelly is going to set, we're going to drizzle a small amount onto a dinner plate that's been chilling in the freezer. If the mixture wrinkles when you push it with your finger, it is ready to go. Now this is the point where you can optionally preserve your marmalade. Into some sanitized canning jars they go, lids tightened, and placed in a steaming rack set in a pot of simmering water. 10 minutes in the simmering water, and then 24 hours at room temperature, making sure the safety buttons have popped down. Now in the movie and on the posters, it looks as though Paddington enjoys his marmalade sandwiches on semi-whole wheat bread. So in the bowl of a stand mixer, we're combining 250 grams of whole wheat flour, 2 tablespoons of honey, and 325 grams of water. Regular size whisking until smooth, and then topping with 250 grams of all-purpose flour, an additional half teaspoon of instant yeast, 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, and a tablespoon of olive oil. Cover with plastic wrap and let sit at room temperature for 30 minutes until big and foamy and puffy, and it makes you think of Brad Leone. The reason we've made this sort of whole wheat sponge is because whole wheat flour takes longer to absorb water. So now when we knead it together on medium speed with a dough hook for about 7 minutes, we're going to get a more accurate picture of how hydrated our dough is. And your first reaction is going to be, oh my god, it's way too too sticky, I wasted a pound of flour, how am I going to get into heaven now? But worry not, because we want this dough to be very well hydrated, and it will become much more handleable after rising in a well-oiled bowl for 1 hour or until doubled in size. So cover it in plastic wrap and let it hang out until it's big and poofy and ready to be shaped into its final form. First up, we gotta generously flour our worktop, and then we're gonna turn the dough out, massage it minimally to knock out any air bubbles, and then we're rolling it out to one long big old thing, with a length of maybe 20 inches and a width no wider than your intended loaf pan. We're then going to roll it up tightly and place it in said loaf pan after it's been well lubricated with vegetable oil. Then we are cutting some parchment paper down to size, pressing it into our loaf pan with about 2 inches of overhang on each side, dropping the loaf in, and then generously greasing up 2 sheets of plastic wrap. We want plenty of plastic wrap so it can be tented over the loaf, and we want oil so it don't stick. And as you can see, the overhanging parchment paper helps us tent the plastic wrap over the loaf so it is not impeded during its 1 to 2 hour rise. Now, mine rose a little unevenly, so I made the inadvisable decision to score it, which made it deflate a little bit, so only do that if you have to. But either way, we're baking at 425 degrees Fahrenheit for 40 to 50 minutes, checking at 30 minutes and loosely tenting with foil if the loaf is starting to brown too quickly. Once the loaf is done, it should have an internal temperature of between 200 to 210 degrees Fahrenheit and should look almost exactly like a loaf of whole wheat bread. We're now going to use our handy dandy parchment paper overhang to retrieve it from the pan, place it on a cooling rack, and brush the whole thing down with melted butter. This is going to give our loaf a nice sheen while we let it cool completely for at least 2 hours. Cut into it 1 minute sooner and you will annihilate your bread's texture. And there you have it, folks, a little weirdly shaped but perfectly serviceable half whole wheat sandwich bread, ideal for the making of marmalade sandwiches. The only other ingredient of which I could see in the movie was a generous slathering of high quality butter, an absolute necessity to balance out the extreme sharpness of our genuine Seville orange marmalade. Normally I'd want to toast a sandwich like this, but Paddington's appear to be soft and rather pliable, so there you have it.
All the vitamins and minerals a bear needs for a whole day.
More like all the sugar and carbs you could possibly fit into a sandwich. Time to take a big cartoon-shaped bite, and I'll tell you, this is really, really good. Tart, bright fruit and rich, creamy butter, tucked between 2 slices of hearty, wholesome, wheaty bread. Really, my only complaint is Paddington's claim that a wise bear always keeps a marmalade sandwich under his hat in case of emergencies, an experience like so many others that left me feeling confused and sticky. But before we call it a day, I want to share with you what I think is the ultimate expression of marmalade, and that is on English-style scones. Into the bowl of a food processor goes 425 grams of all-purpose flour, half a teaspoon of salt, 2 tablespoons of baking powder, and 50 grams of sugar. We're going to pulse that to combine before stopping and adding 1 stick or 110 grams of cold unsalted butter, which we're going to pulse until no large chunks remain, almost like we're making a short crust. Then into a large bowl goes 1 cup or 236 milliliters of whole milk and 2 large eggs, whisked together, and then add the dry ingredients. Then we're just going to fold this together using a rubber spatula until it forms a shaggy dough that just kind of holds its shape. Turn it out onto a well-floured worktop and knead just a little bit until no large cracks remain. Then we're rolling it out just a little bit. We want to get it to about a 1-inch thickness, which we're then going to cut into 2.5-inch rounds. I'm going to use this highfalutin fancy fluted pastry cutter, which of course we're going to dust with flour to prevent stickage, and then we're going to place our scones directly onto a parchment-lined baking sheet where we're then going to brush them down with a mixture of equal parts beaten egg and whole milk. You could also optionally brush these down with melted butter, or just egg, or milk, or nothing if you want your scones to be not as good. Into a 450 degree Fahrenheit oven they go for 10 to 12 minutes until puffed and browned and flaky and scone-like. The perfect accompaniment to 11's or afternoon tea, where they would most likely be served with butter and marmalade. Now, as far as I know, Paddington Bear does not mention scones as a preferred marmalade delivery system, but I'd like to think that he would approve. He is, after all, a very wise and very British bear.